welcome to this special edition of Talk of the Neighborhoods. I'm Joe Heisler, your host, coming to you from the BNN Live Studios, Eggleston Square, Jamaica Plain, where tonight on the Boston Neighborhood Network, we bring you Election 2013. That's right, 2+ hours of live coverage from including all the results from today's preliminary election here in the city of Boston. Of course, the polls just closed a little more than a half hour ago. There's still people waiting in line in some places. A very tight race, perhaps the best field in, well, more than 20 years. The last time it was an open seat, and some people say 30 years. It has brought a wealth of candidates, most of them very well qualified to become the next mayor of the city of Boston. The polling showing it too close to call, and tonight we'll find out who the winners are, who the top two finishers are that go on to the final election in November. Also on the ballot today, 19 candidates running at large for 4 city council seats, 4 at-large city council seats. There's also some very interesting district council races with so many candidates jumping into the mayor's race. Tonight, we'll find out who moves on in those races as well. Some very special guests tonight, a terrific show. The man many people think could well be the next governor of the Commonwealth of Mass. He joins us. That is Steve Grossman, the state treasurer. Also, the man who is currently Suffolk County Sheriff, who hopes to continue to be Suffolk County Sheriff. Steve Tompkins joins us, as well as more than a dozen other analysts, including media personalities, public officials, neighborhood activists. All of that tonight you'll get. And coming up in just a few minutes, joining me as well, a special guest host, Seth McCoy. All of that and more tonight on Talk of the Neighborhoods. Tonight, election 2013, the race, the election we've all been waiting for, the preliminary election that will narrow the field in the mayor's race, the council races, and tonight we have 2+ hours of coverage, starting in this segment with some very special guests. As I mentioned at the top of the show, man many people believe could be the next governor of the Commonwealth of Massachusetts. He's currently, of course, it's state treasurer, serving his first term, and he was nice enough to come by and join us tonight for this show. We're talking Steve Grossman. Steve, thanks so much for joining us.
Thanks so much for having me. I appreciate it.
And, of course, the man who stepped into the shoes of the Suffolk County Sheriff and will be running for election in his own right next year as well, Steve Tompkins. Thank you, Steve.
Joseph, thank you for having me. Appreciate it.
Nice to have you both here.
Okay.
He needed no training. He stepped in like he was a natural.
I know.
I learned from a master. Okay, come on.
Well, guys, there are a few candidates out there on pins and needles today, tonight, all day, in fact, thinking about waiting for the results. Of course, the polls are now closed. But Steve, you've been there and run before and then elected this last time around. And Steve, you'll get your baptism of fire coming up. I know you've been involved in some campaigns. What are all these candidates feeling out there tonight?
I hope they're feeling good about what they've done, because if you think and read and watch this race, 12 candidates for mayor, they really have done a terrific job at talking about the things that matter to the people of this city. They've talked about jobs, they've talked about education, they've talked about spreading prosperity more widely, they've talked about every manner of issue. It's been a positive campaign, it's been issues-oriented, it's shed more light than heat, as we like to say. So I think even those candidates who are disappointed when they put their head down on the pillow tonight, I hope they say, I did my best, I left no stone unturned, I reflected credit on myself, I represented my values and the values of the people of this city. And for that, I say thank you to all 12 of candidates.
Keep it in perspective. Steve, of course, you can always hope that this trend will continue, but Boston's always been known as a city, in politics, some sharp elbows. Some people compared it to a blood sport. This has been unusually civil, don't you think?
I think it's been very civil, and although I agree with the treasurer, that's a good thing. I would have liked to see a little more dust kicked up, just because folks want to see what's going to happen. I think that's going to happen in the next phase. When you get down to the next two, that's where you're really going to see them go at it. But here's what resonates with me loud and clear, is that the city is really remarkably changing. You're going to have a new mayor, you're going to have mostly a new city council, you're going to have a new police commissioner, a new school superintendent, and you're going to have a new governor shortly. And so where do we go from here? And I think the 21st century is going to be awesome in the city of Boston.
Well, some people thought that perhaps this was the year. Of course, we've had now our first African-American governor. We've had our first African-American president. That maybe this was the year we had first African-American mayor. The polls, well, they're not clear. It's certainly, but there's a number of great candidates in the race, and I guess that says something in and of itself.
That could happen. It's way too close to call, as you said earlier. It's all margin of error, as we like to say in the political business. But think about just what happened in the recent past. Think about Linda Dorsina-Forey getting elected to the state senate, representing South Boston, and she will be a terrific, terrific leader for all the people of her senate district. So I agree with Steve. This city is changing dramatically, and it needs to change dramatically in terms of spreading economic prosperity more widely. That is our biggest challenge right now, leveling the playing field and leaving no one behind. And that is the challenge that the next mayor will face, whoever she or he is.
Of course, polls are polls, and we all know it's just a snapshot, a place in time, so to speak, but showing an incredible amount of undecided voters in this in this race, and perhaps it's correct, maybe they're not. What does that say? That the fact that there were so many undecided so late in the preliminary season?
Well, and I think it speaks to the number of new and first-time candidates. You've got people from all over the spectrum that are now in the race, and the people don't really know them. You see, they know a Steve Grossman for all the work that he's done, and they know others. But say a Charles Clemens, a Michelle Wu in the citywide, and others, Jack Kelly, and so on and so forth. They don't know these folks, so they don't really have their arms. They don't have a barometer. They don't have their arms around them right now. So tonight is going to be very telling. But what happens after tonight, beginning tomorrow, is really, I think, what's going to turn the worm.
Well, of course, and we've got a few minutes. I want to very quickly talk about, dare we look ahead? I know you both are, to 2014. There's been so many elections. Well, of course, the drama of the presidential election, then we've had a number of special elections, at least here in the city, and now in the suburbs. There's now congressional district primary. Some talk about voter fatigue out there. You guys are on the hustings. You're out there just about every day talking to people. Do you get that sense people are kind of fatigued by this?
I hear about voter fatigue, but I think what is really important is you've got to excite the imagination of voters. If you come up with an idea or an approach to problem solving, common sense problem solving, that people say, now, he or she is speaking to me, to my kids, to my parents, to the education that I owe my children, that this city and this community owes all of our kids. So I think it's about exciting the imagination by being bold, by being innovative, by not holding back, by not being tentative. Get out there and be bold. Stand for something. Let people know who you are, what you stand for, the kind of leadership you want to provide. And then if they don't buy it, at least you did your best. But don't hold back. Don't be timid. This is not a time for timidity. Boston and Massachusetts have always been laboratories of experimentation and innovation for 400 years. And any of these candidates who wants to be the next mayor or wants to be in the city council, you get 19 candidates running at large, they've got to lay it out there and be willing to wear it out there on their sleeve and be willing to put it all and leave it all in the field.
So consider this. When you talk about voter fatigue and you talk about the number of races, this is what I look at. This gives opportunity, particularly for folks that either have not been in the political mainstream or folks of color, to really get engaged. Not necessarily as the candidate, but all of that behind the scenes thing. You know what I mean? The campaign managers, the accountants, the field operatives. This gives them an opportunity to learn their craft and move up. And so, we may be looking at the future Doug Rubins down the road 10 years from now, 10 years from now, or the Mike Knieves, because right now, at this time, with all of these races, this is giving folks a platform to learn their craft.
Any of these candidates kind of jump out at you? And I know you're not wading into endorsements or anything like that. That kind of struck you as striking a different chord, or really striking the chord of voters in a different way.
It's interesting. I love wonderful, incredible personal stories. Jack Kelly has an extraordinary story.
Right. From Charlestown.
Exactly. And Jack Kelly coming back from addiction to being a person who's making something out of his life and wants to deliver for his community. Excuse me, you've got a restaurant owner from the North End who's running and bringing small business perspective. Michelle Wu, although many people don't know it, also a candidate for at-large city council, was a small business owner in Chicago and brings a wonderful perspective. So I agree with Steve, but I also think that what's really most important is, what do we deliver? How do we deliver jobs, entrepreneurship, and economic development to the neighborhoods of Boston that have been left out and left behind? I think all the time. I'm a small business owner. I ran a business for 35 years. As state treasurer, we put together a small business banking partnership, and we poured money into local banks, community banks, regional banks that have been willing to lend money to small businesses in the neighborhoods of Boston and in our gateway communities. We need to create wealth and economic opportunity broadly shared all over the city. That, to me, is the principal goal.
I'm going to agree with Steve on the personal stories. Michelle Wu's story, I think, is fantastic. If you look at the mayor's race, I think John Barrow's story is fantastic. And if you look at what I would call an incumbent or a guy who's been around for quite some time, I look at Robbie Consalvo. Robbie has done some great things. I'm up in Hyde Park. Robbie is my city councilor. He's extraordinary, and I don't know that a lot of people have known that about Robbie. This race gave him the opportunity to introduce himself to the electorate.
Right, he's a district councilor.
I agree. I go to his event at the Elks over there every year, and I mean, but by the time the event starts, there are 500 people in the room. They love him because he loves them and because he delivers for them over and over again. Rob Consalvo is a guy who never lost his feel for the neighborhoods and the streets of his community. That, to me, is noteworthy.
Yeah.
Well, and guys, we've got a couple minutes. I've got to ask you about 2014, because as soon as this one's over, all of us pundits, political junkies, some would call us, will immediately focus on next year's race. Steve, you've already indicated that you're planning to run. Or
I'm running. I'm out there.
You're definitely running.
I want people to say he's everywhere. Those are the two words I want people to say about me. He's everywhere.
You know what? And they're saying it because he is everywhere.
I know. I see him all the time.
Before I came here tonight, I was in Norwell meeting with grassroots activists in Norwell. So it's a...
But has the... will the tenor of the campaign or the focus of the campaigns change? Of course, so much has been focused on jobs because of the recession, et cetera, et cetera. We seem to be digging our way out of this now. How do you think the campaign turns next year? What will you be focusing on?
Look,
primarily?
I'm running for governor because I think the people of this Commonwealth want proven leadership that will leave no one behind. So it's always been about leveling the playing field for me. My grandfather came to East Boston in 1900. We've been here for 113 years. We've had a business for 103 years. We've benefited from this city and this community, and giving back is something we all do. But fundamentally, I'm proud to be the only, at this moment, the only business person in this race, somebody who spent his life creating jobs, running a business, meeting a payroll, and I've taken that into the state treasurer's office, and I think I've demonstrated that you can use government as a force for leveling the playing field and encompassing people and providing economic opportunity. Entrepreneurship is what this city and this state has been all about. As I said, experimentation and innovation, and I want to continue that tradition, building on a foundation that Val Patrick created, but going to the next level.
Well, and little devil's advocate here, of course, some people saying after 8 years of Deval Patrick, perhaps the Republicans are positioned to make a comeback. You also potentially could face a primary in this race as well.
Well, I've got a primary. I've got a whole bunch of candidates, and Charlie Baker will be out there running on his own. But at the end of the day, it is all about looking people in the eye and demonstrating to them that you have the common sense solutions that are going to improve the quality of their lives. I mean, the neighborhoods of Boston and our gateway, our older industrial cities, have been left out, left behind. Unemployment levels are too high. We've got to spread it more widely. It can't be enough to just have it be in a certain few industries and a certain sections of the state. It's got to be spread widely. Don't leave people out. Don't leave people behind. There are too many people living in the neighborhoods of Boston that still have not benefited from this wealth creation. We're creating more we have more diversity than ever before and more inequality than ever before. And the inequality that I see every day is something we need to deal with. That's the next mayor's going to deal with that, the city council's going to deal with that, a governor's going to deal with that, and a sheriff deals with that.
Well, and what tack will you take? Of course, Steve, you cut your teeth working with Andrea Cabral, a former sheriff who you succeeded, but I know you also did a lot of work in Elizabeth Warren's campaign for the Senate here.
Well, I want to follow what the treasurer said about the equity and being equitable and being fair. And my perch clearly is criminal justice, public safety. And so we have to look at how we get people back home, how we get people out of jail. It costs $46,000 to incarcerate. I've got over 1,400 guys in my facility. What happens is that taxes the system, but that also taxes the household. The father needs to be at home. The mother needs to be at home, needs to be raising their kids. And so what we're looking at is how do we work within that community correction system with parole, probation, law enforcement to keep folks out of jail? And then how do we work with those that are transitioning out to stay out? And that goes back to employment. They need jobs, they need housing, and they need health care. And so I'm anxiously looking forward to working with you as the treasurer or the governor to make sure that we enrich people's lives.
And let me add one postscript to that. What sheriffs need as much as anything, and I know all the sheriffs in the Commonwealth, I know Steve real well, he's a dear, dear friend. What sheriffs need is a bigger investment in mental health services, behavioral health services, substance abuse services. We have cut those again and again and again. It's an unwise decision to have made. I understand budgets that had to be cut, but we need, as the economy comes back, to invest in mental health, behavioral health, and substance abuse. It will keep men and women out of those situations, and it'll get them back in a productive life, which is really what this is all about.
Of course, Steve, I've got to ask you, because there's 12 people running for mayor here, 10 of whom will not be going on, and some have suggested that they'll be looking for a place to land. Are you worried that you might inherit some competition next year's?
No, I'm a big fan of the democratic process. And so you have more people in the mix that are more voices that bring solutions. Now, I'm going to win, but it's not bad to have competition because it just sharpens what you do. So no, I don't fear that. Bring it on.
And of course, Steve, the Attorney General, Martha Coakley, just announced that she is intending to run as well. Does that change the way you approach your campaign for governor? And
No, I think it's important to basically be authentic, be who you are. I think it's important for somebody like me who spent 35 years running a business, growing a business successfully, building a business, who knows how to create jobs, and who demonstrated that as treasurer of the Commonwealth during these last almost 3 years, to be in the business of creating jobs, economic opportunity, broadly shared. She'll run her race, excuse me, I'll run mine, but at the end of the day, it's about being who you are, looking people in the eye, asking for their support.
let the chips fall where they may.
Exactly.
Both of you, right, guys?
Exactly. So I'm excited about the race, and I'm excited about this guy being sheriff for another 6 years. 6-year term, right?
It's a 6-year term, but I have to run in 2014 and then 2016 before I get to the 6
again?
year. I do, right, to finish out Andrea's term.
Scott Brown effect there, multiple, one step at a time. Just very quickly, we do have some very early returns now, and we want to quickly bring you up to date. Of course, joining us live in studio here is State Treasurer Steve Grossman and Suffolk Sheriff Steve Tompkins. But very quickly now, with 6.9% of the precincts reporting, we want to give you a quick update. And there you can see it. These are the top 4 results for mayor at this point in time. And it's showing, and again, we're not certain where these numbers are coming from. It could dramatically skew the outcome, or at least the numbers at this point. But wherever they're coming from, Marty Walsh is doing very well. That's, of course, the state representative, Martin Walsh. And not too far behind him, City Councilor at Large John Connolly. Dan Connolly, the Suffolk DA, is back a ways from there. And then Charlotte Golar-Ritchie, former state rep, former DND commissioner, and worked with the Patrick administration, Menino administration, is 4th. These, again, are very preliminary results. 6.9% of the precincts reporting. I don't know if we have the other numbers. We will be tabulating them and bringing them to you shortly. And here we have some District 8 numbers. And again, this is with 4.5 reporting.
Wow.
And so far, Josh Zakem, who was the famous namesake of his father, whom the bridge is named after, well-known activist, he has a large lead. Again, we're not sure where these numbers are coming from. Very preliminary. And of course, they are unofficial numbers. That's District 8.
Let me make one final comment, because I think we're probably near the end of the hour.
Yes, we are.
Just as I hope to build on a foundation that Deval Patrick has put in place, I think these two finalists, whoever they happen to be tonight, and the one who wins on November 5th, I think it is,
Right.
Has an unbelievable foundation that Tom Menino has created. What Tom Menino has done for this city in the past 20 years, what this city looks like today, the sense of empowerment and stakeholdership that so many citizens feel, even with some of the challenges we still have, is truly remarkable. And I would not want to let my time here on the set end without really expressing our appreciation, all of us, for that foundation. He has really built an amazing, to be built on, not to stay static, but to go beyond. And every political person needs to be gone beyond, but it's been quite a run.
And I would agree, love him or hate him, I don't think there's anybody that doesn't agree the city has made great progress in the last 20 years. Even those who are looking forward to a new brand of leadership. And guys, we appreciate you coming by tonight and joining us again.
Thank you for having us.
State Treasurer Steve Grossman, of course, running for governor next year. Next year is a very big year for, well, the Commonwealth certainly, and we'll be watching to see your progress. I have to say you've made great progress to date. Looking forward to it. And of course, Suffolk County Sheriff Steve Tompkins, who inherited that mantle from his mentor, his predecessor, Andrea Cabral, and running in his own right next year as well. Guys, appreciate it. You got to love this day. If you love politics, if you love elections, it doesn't get much better than this.
No, it doesn't. And the fact of the matter is, for me, I mean, he's Suffolk County, and that's what his beat is. For me, it's 351 cities and towns, but I will be working very, very hard and look forward to coming back on the set as often as you'll have me to talk to the people of the city of Boston about our future and what a governor can do to really deliver for the people of the city.
In fact, Joe, next year
and this guy is on the set here. Of course,
the treasurer's been on our show also, but next year you need to come out to the Democratic Convention. You need to bring your show on the road.
There you go.
Because that's going to be a lot of fun out at the Democratic Convention.
Where's the convention at? In Worcester.
Yep.
Worcester.
Come on out.
We'd love to. We keep trying to take this show on the road. We cover a lot of ground in studio, but we're always looking for new opportunities. Guys, I want to thank you both so much for coming.
Thank you.
Steve Grossman,
Thanks
as
so much,
always.
Jim. Thank you.
Steve Tompkins, who hosts his own show here on BNN TV, and is a well-known face as well. We appreciate it. We're going to shift now. We're going to go over to my colleague, who's guest hosting tonight, a favorite of mine. Seth McCoy joins us with her own guests and some more updates on the latest results from today's preliminary election. Seth, here's to you.
Thanks, Joe. City councilor and all-around guru of everything Boston politics. So you just sat down and you basically told me what you think the final is. So let's tell the viewers at home what you think it's.
With 70% of the vote totaled, Marty Walsh 1, John Conley 2, Dan Conley 3, Charlotte Golevich 4. Subject to change, but that appears the way it's going to end up.
So anything about that surprise you?
No, not really. I mean, it's the new Boston is the old Boston.
Right.
Both John Conley and Marty Walsh both had terrific get out the vote operations, the ground troops, the bodies that went and found the voters, got them to the polls, and drove them home. And that's really what this race was all about.
What about candidates like Felix Arroyo, Rob Consalvo? Some people had them maybe finishing a little higher. Maybe not in the top 2, but certainly coming in a little bit in maybe the top 4, top 5.
Well, there's a sense that, I mean, there is, the census is correct. The city is majority minority. So you would think that Felix, Latino candidacy, or John Barros or Charlotte would have done better. But you know, it's still Boston. The vote still comes from essentially 5 to 6 precincts within the city, and that's where you focus, and that's where you get the vote, and that's where the vote historically has come from, and that's where it came from today.
And so we're looking at a mayoral election between Marty Walsh, John Conley, and what do you think now the steps are? I mean, clearly there are distinct differences between the two candidates. Marty is a big labor guy, John is a huge charter school guy. How do you think that will play out?
Well, for sure it's a contrast between the two. Education is important. I think as I understand it, Walsh is also in favor of raising the charter school cap.
Yep.
So it'd be interesting to see where the Boston Teachers Union, where they end up. Their candidates were Rob Consalvo and Felix.
Yep.
But it's, you know, Marty Walsh, a labor person, but that's not necessarily, historically, it's always been a good thing.
Right.
I'm not sure why now it's not a good thing to be a labor candidate. But
Well, I think people obviously tried to paint it that if Marty Walsh becomes mayor, when he's negotiating contracts, it'll be difficult for him to step away from the table as a labor guy and make decisions based on what's best for the city.
I don't quite see it that way. I think he is a labor person, but, you know, actually he'll face more pressure to do the right thing. That is
Right.
to be open, transparent, and not be the labor guy. So he'll be under a lot of pressure to be not anti-labor certainly, but to
Right. To
you
be
know,
fair and
to be
balanced.
fair and balanced, and that's a very good way to put it.
Right. So with the candidates who did not make it to the final, do you see any particular order into which they might go? Who do you think is going to go to Marty's camp? Who do you think is going to go to John Conley's camp? And of course, these are not final numbers. We're still waiting to see what that turns out to be, but we think that may be how it ends up.
That's my understanding.
With, as I said, 70% of the vote in, so it would be remarkable if that was not the final. It'd be interesting because it's, you know, frankly, 22. I think Marty was at 22%, John was at 18%. Well, that means 60% of the vote is out there to be from the primary.
Right.
But the final always goes up, and the final will be it'll be more liberal, more progressive vote that comes out.
Yeah.
So it'll be interesting. I think it's a dead heat. I mean, I really do. I don't think the 4 percentage points means very much, and I think it'll be a very exciting October and first week of November.
Well, I was going to say, this campaign has been very cordial from, you know, the summer months and up until today.
Right.
Now the gloves come off.
I think so. I don't think there'll be. I think there'll be sharper edges. There'll be little sharper elbows. I mean, after all, now the prize is right there for
Right.
the two of them. The problem with the primary, frankly, there were just too many people in the race. It's virtually impossible for the print media and for the television media to cover 12 people.
Right.
You can't do it. And
Although BNN did a fantastic job trying to get all the candidates in for both the mayor's race and the at-large race.
But you know, sadly, you and I will say New England cable news was pretty good, but 4, 5, and 7
Right.
historically, who've been very good, haven't really paid much attention to this
Right.
mayor's race. And if you
Does that surprise you? Because I mean, we haven't had the opportunity to really vote for a new mayor in
I'm
20
shocked.
years.
It's shocking, frankly, that there hasn't been more attention paid to the race. But I really think it's because there were too many candidates. I mean, and you can't say that folks shouldn't have run, but
Right.
it's just virtually impossible to cover 12 people.
Well, and there were a lot of good candidates. I think that's the distinction too, is that looking at who the candidates were, there really wasn't, there were a lot of good people to
There were.
choose from.
That's for sure. And the one televised debate was, it was a little bit of a free-for-all. It was chaotic. There were 7 or 8
Right.
good people, all who wanted to make a statement.
Yeah.
And it was just too disorganized and too chaotic. And I'm not blaming New England cable news. They actually televised it, and they were
Right.
besides BNN, they were the only folks who did. It was just too many people, and it was.
Right.
It would have been smarter, I think, just to kind of weed out. And there were 7 or 8 good candidates, very good candidates.
Right.
And those would have been the folks to focus on.
Any candidates you think shouldn't have been in the race?
Oh, I don't know.
You don't want to say that.
Probably, but it's you know, if you look back, sure, there were candidates that should have been in there.
And I think, you know, there was certainly some discussion among the Black community to focus in and try to promote Charlotte to that finish line, which really ruffled the feathers of other candidates of color.
Right.
Do you think that, and I will say that she stepped back and said, hey, this isn't me that
Right.
was pushing for this. However, there were people involved in her campaign that were part of that momentum.
That's what I understand.
Do you think that backfired on her?
Maybe a little bit, but not. That certainly didn't cost her a spot in the top two. I was impressed by John Barrows. You know, it's not an easy thing to earn the endorsement of the Globe,
Right.
and he did. So even though he didn't, I'm not sure quite where he finished in the order here, but he ran a very good campaign, and he's a terrific young man, and with a great educational background, a commitment to his community, and you know, served on the appointed school board. So that's pretty impressive stuff.
Yeah, and somebody who might, as it turns out, end up in the next mayor's office if he so chooses.
I would reach out to John Barrows, and I can see Rob Consalvo, who is a personal favorite of mine, in part because he really is a wonk. He reads Municipal Magazine Today and implements the ideas. He's great. I like him.
He loves Governing Magazine.
He does, and I like him, and I think he's got some good ideas, and he'll continue to contribute for sure.
Yeah. Let's talk a little bit about the at-large race. Are you hearing any of the finals for that? Because, of course, talking about a large field, this one had 19.
Sure, 19 to be soon 8. Yeah. My understanding is Mike Flaherty, who's a former at-large counselor and candidate for mayor, is number 1. But there are very few results in, and it's certainly no surprise there.
Really?
The Michaels, he's number 1. I mean,
right, and do you think that's because obviously he was a city council before, he was city council president, he ran for mayor before.
And it's the city council at-large race particularly is name recognition, and people recognize Mike Flaherty's name. Frankly, even though he ran for mayor and lost, no one really walked away with a bad sense of Mike Flaherty. So he's he's an impressive candidate. I think he'll do well in the new administration. He's been there, he's grounded. I think he will finish in the top 4 for sure. Another person that people have been talking a lot about is Jack Kelly from Charlestown. Yeah, I've met Jack, and I liked him. I'm not quite sure how he's going to finish, but he's got a nice story to tell, and I know he was involved with the mayor's office, and I think he was neighborhood services person over there one time. Yes. People in Charlestown like him. Now, I'm not quite sure how he ran and resonated citywide. I'm not sure that people understand how difficult it is to run a city-wide race for... It's a lot harder than people... It's very hard, very difficult, and there just isn't a lot of money. The mayor's race kind of took up all the money and sucked all the oxygen out of the room, leaving very little discussion for the at-large race. But I think that'll change in the final 2. And what about the incumbents, Ayanna Pressley and Steve Murphy, who of course is council president? I expect, my understanding right now is Mike Flaherty's first, but that could change. But I expect that Steve Murphy and Ayanna will be certainly comfortably in the top 4. Right. And of course right now we're just whittling it down to 8, and then we'll go from here until November, and then it comes down to the 4. Well, if you think there was little attention paid to the mayor's race, there was virtually no attention to the at-large city council race. But that'll change. I think, people are now in the election mode, and there's going to be a new mayor, and there are going to be people like me and others who are going to say, well, who are the city councilors going to be? Right. Let's focus on who these folks are. So, right. And I'm hearing that with 11% reporting, it's Flaherty, Presley, Murphy, and Wu. And Michelle Wu was somebody that started out very early. She, of course, was on the Elizabeth Warren campaign, made a lot of her roots here. She lives in the South End, has a great story. So I wouldn't be surprised to see her in that top 4 of the finishers. Well, the good news for the at-large folks who are running, like Mike Flaherty and Michelle Wu, are the 2 vacancies. Right. And it's always easier when there are vacancies, simply because someone's going to win. And I've met Michelle Wu. She's very personable, likable, has a nice story to tell. And it wouldn't surprise me at all if it's Flaherty, Steve Murphy, and Ayanna Pressley and Michelle Wu were the finalists. Do you think
once we narrow it down to the 8 tonight, do you think that that order will change much between now and November?
It might. I think you see a more progressive vote. So, I think Ayanna, she finished first the last time. She may move up. But I think Mike Flaherty and Steve are 1-2, and
Yeah.
Ayanna probably may jump up into the top 2.
Right.
And Michelle probably will grab that 4th seat. Certainly, that's the way it seems right now.
Well, for all the talk that there weren't any women except for Charlotte running for mayor, we had a lot of women running for at-large. Are you surprised that not as many women ran for mayor, but we had 5, I think, candidates who were women running for at-large?
I think part of the issue with the mayor's race was that Mayor Menino really didn't decide until the very end, until it was very
Right.
late, that he was going to not run for another term. So if there were other women out there who were thinking about it, considering it, it was just too late. And I think Charlotte got into the race late. But if there were other women, and I've heard, I can't think of anyone's name who was mentioned, and there may have been some, it was probably too late to raise the money and run a full-scale citywide campaign. John Conley has been running for mayor for 2 years.
Right.
And Marty Walsh had the ability to harness labor, that labor vote and the labor movement. And Dan Conley has been the DA running citywide and countywide for over 10 years. So,
Do you think Dan Conley now runs for AG?
well, that's a good question. I've heard that rumor. I know Dan pretty well. I like him. He's very well respected as the DA. He's grounded. I don't know if Martha Coakley's running for governor, then there's certainly going to be a new AG. When I started off in politics, I worked for Frank Bellatti's campaign. Then I became an assistant AG, and I can tell you that there is no more exciting place to be if you're a lawyer than to be an assistant attorney general. It's great, and but it's a statewide race, and
Right.
Dan would have to go out and raise another couple of $1 million. Not easy.
No, definitely not easy, and that's one of the things.
But he's a terrific candidate, and I think he'd certainly be considered seriously for AG.
One of my theories all along has been that whoever becomes the next mayor might be the rebound mayor, if you will, sort of like a rebound boyfriend or girlfriend, because Mayor Menino has such a distinguished career behind him that people might think, well, I'll give this guy a shot, and in 4 years they might be tired of that person. Do you think something like that might hold true?
No.
Plain and simple.
It's a terrific idea to posit, but I'll tell you why. That was the opinion a lot of folks had of Ray Flynn. That
Right.
Following Kevin White, he was going to be the interim mayor, and that someone else would take over in 4 years, and he served 10 distinguished years. So I think once you're in there, people get accustomed to you. They understand who you are, and they get accustomed. And it's. I'd be surprised, in light of and also in view of the fact that I don't think an incumbent mayor has lost in Boston in over 50 or 60 years.
We probably won't see another mayor have as long a tenure as Mayor Menino did, though.
Unlikely. I'm a big fan of term limits, and that's no criticism of anybody. But if we can term limit the President of the United States, and I think we should bring in new ideas every 2-3 terms or whatever the number is. Just bring in new people.
Speaking of new ideas, I'm going to welcome to the show Senator Sonia Chang-Diaz, who has snuck in beside you.
That's okay. Nice to
She's
see
right
you,
there for
Senator.
us.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
Sure.
So, Senator, you were out on the campaign trail today for Charlotte. Was there anything that you noticed out there? Were you surprised about? Mike was just talking that the way he's seeing it and what he's hearing is that it's going to be Marty Walsh and John Connolly. Are you surprised by that? What is your take on the race today?
Well, so I'm still not calling it yet. On the elevator up here to the studio, someone was showing me results, but I think they said 32 or 33% of precincts reporting in. So we still have a lot of results left to go. For any of us any folks who were in the trenches a few special elections back. On the special election for the first Suffolk Senate seat, which was Linda Dorsey Nefori and Nick Collins. We didn't know until the very last minute.
Yeah, that went back and forth all
called
night.
it wrong, so
Yeah.
we got a lot yet to go. So in terms of surprises on the campaign, I mean, this wasn't a total surprise, but something that's just so markedly different from most other elections, certainly that I've been involved with, was just the number of undecided voters. Walking into I was stationed at one of our voting locations in Jamaica Plain, and I mean, literally people in the sort of 30 yards between the door, and they're filling in the bubble, they're still making up their minds.
Right.
And so there are a lot of people. I mean, normally on election day, I would much prefer to be on the doors rather than at the polling station, because by the time people get to the polling station, they've made up their minds.
Right.
But today, there were several voters that I talked to where it made me feel very useful at the polling station, because I was really helping people, work through their final decision-making process.
I was surprised at that too. At work today, somebody at work told me that she was undecided, and this was at 1:30 in the afternoon. And so she was going home tonight, and she was going to be voting. And for somebody, or the three of us who I'm sure pretty much knew who our candidate would be all along, when you get to the polling location, to really still not have an idea of who you might vote for is kind of shocking. But
well, I mean, I was very empathetic, because I didn't make up my mind until last week. And that's really late for me.
Right.
Well, they were good candidates. I mean, there were 6 or 7 candidates who made impassioned pleas as to why they should be mayor. And so I'm not entirely, I agree with the senator, that there were a lot of people that were undecided.
Right.
And I think they made up their mind within the last few days.
Charlotte was your first choice, but who would have been your second choice if you had to?
Oh goodness, that's a question I'm not prepared for. I'm gonna say, thankfully, that it's a decision that the ballot doesn't force me to make,
Right.
and it was hard enough for me to make a first choice, that I honestly couldn't tell you. I'd probably have to agonize over it for several more weeks before I could tell you who would have been my second choice.
We were also talking about the at-large race and just how many good candidates there were
Yeah.
for the,
Yeah.
to whittle it down to the 8.
Yeah.
Anybody that stood out to you as somebody that you really want to see on the Boston City Council?
Yeah. Well, I mean, first of all, Ayanna Pressley, I want to make sure she gets back on there. I think she's a huge talent. But I suspect your question was more about new
blood, because we, of
new
course,
blood.
have 2 seats, 2
Right.
open seats.
Right. Michelle Wu, I think, is a real standout candidate. And that I really saw evidence of. I mean, I endorsed her, so put all my cards on the table. But I also saw a lot of evidence of her hard work over the last several months, of all of the comers for the at-large seats that I saw, signs and people for at the polling station today. Most frequently, I was hearing from voters, of my 4 votes, I know I'm giving 1 to Michelle. So I think we're going to see her make it certainly into the final cut, and I suspect she'll make it into onto the council in the end.
What are some of your concerns for the city moving forward? Issues that you think need to be focused on?
Well, I've been really pleased to see a very heavy focus on education issues in this race. And
I know you're a new mother. We should
Yeah.
we should announce that. I'm sure you've.
I brought my daughter with me to the studio tonight, actually. So
congratulations
She'll give
on
me
that.
a review when I get off the stage.
Exactly.
But thank you for the
You're
congrats.
welcome.
Yeah, so I've got new skin in the game in that sense, but it has always been an issue of primary focus for me. I chair the education committee on the state legislative level, and there's so much interlacing between city level policy and state level policy. So it's an issue I'm really pleased to see the candidates focusing so heavily on this year. So I'll be watching for that, and I know most other voters will be in the general election. Safety is another big one.
Yes, that's obviously the new mayor is going to have a Boston Police Commissioner to select.
Right.
Right, new commissioner, new
Superintendent.
of the schools.
Yeah.
A lot of exciting choices to be made.
Any other people that we think might need to be replaced, for example, will the Boston Fire Commissioner leave? Other people that may decide to, once Mayor Menino finishes out his term, might say, okay, well, I've done my time here, it's time to move on.
Well, I think you have to take into consideration many of them are union-protected jobs. So, but certainly the police commissioner, the fire commissioner serve at the pleasure of the mayor. I would, and there are certainly others, advisors, close advisors to the mayor, who would most likely leave. So, I mean, the new mayor will bring in his own team, for
Right.
sure.
Or hers.
Or hers. What should the next police commissioner focus on? Obviously, there's been a lot of talk recently about the need to promote minority police officers up through the ranks. There was an article in the Globe, a couple of the sergeants who were talked about, one being Jim Claiborne, who I will give a plug to because I think he's a fantastic man. But is that something that whoever comes in next is going to have to focus on, making sure that they're actually mentoring the police officers coming in, men, women, of all ethnicities, to make sure that we're elevating people as they come in?
I would say yes, sure, of course. And I'd give a second to Jim Claiborne.
He's great.
He's great. I've known him a long time. He's terrific. I think Ed Davis, Commissioner Davis, was unfairly tarnished with his, that he didn't promote diversity. I think he did.
Right.
There's always room for improvement, and I suspect the next mayor will, with his commissioner, do that. Improve diversity and make it the Boston Police Department more reflective of the residents.
Senator?
Yeah, I would second that. I think certainly it's an issue I would like to see the next commissioner focus on, not just in the mentoring department, although certainly I think that's part of the solution, but also continuing the process that Commissioner Davis has set into motion of really taking a good hard look at the civil service exam process and saying, is this getting us the kind of talent, black, white, green, blue, purple, whatever, but is this getting us the skill set that we want in our public safety leadership?
Absolutely. Well, Mike McCormick, Senator Chang-Diaz, I want to thank you both for being here. We're going to throw it back to Joe, who has a couple of new guests joining us tonight.
Great.
So, Joe, take it away.
Thank you, Seth. Yeah, we're back in Studio B, continuing our coverage of election 2013. The results are coming fast and furious now, and we'll have some updates for you in just a few minutes. But I want to very quickly introduce some special guests joining me in this segment. On my immediate left, he is, of course, former head of the Boston Firefighters Union. Now he is the president of the Professional Firefighters of Massachusetts. I'm talking, of course, about Eddie Kelly. Eddie, nice to have you here joining us.
Thanks for having me. Great to be here.
And also joining us, former Boston Phoenix staff writer and now doing a lot of freelance work. I like to call him muckraker extraordinaire, a good friend, excellent journalist. Chris Ferrone joins us. And Chris, nice to have you here as well, guys. Well, this is coming fast and furious. And let's first quickly go to the latest results that we have with roughly 40% of the numbers coming in. I think we're showing roughly the same what we had before, which is Marty Walsh and John Connolly in the lead. And now Charlotte Golar-Ritchie moving up into third, and Dan Connolly, the Suffolk DA. Again, this is with 42% of the precincts reporting unofficial results, so we'll warn you about that, although these are coming through the City of Boston Election Department, and we believe they are accurate. Again, Marty Walsh, 25%, John Connolly, 18.5%, Charlotte Golar-Ritchie, 11.9%, and Suffolk DA Dan Connolly. And we'll have numbers for the rest very shortly. Of course, this field broad and very interesting field. Guys, I don't think anybody knew what was going to happen tonight. I mean, depending upon who you ask, everybody has their kind of favorite, their thought. Eddie, let's start with you. Of course, the Boston Firefighters Union endorsed Marty Walsh. So looking at those numbers, they've got to be very happy. You've got to be very happy as well.
It's an exciting time. As a City of Boston resident, this is really the first time in my adulthood that we've been in the position where we've had a very legitimate open seat mayor's race. And it's exciting. And we had a great bevy of candidates. And it's going to be interesting to see how the results come in tonight.
Well, it certainly is. And Chris, you've been following it. You've been following a lot of things. But, I don't know at this point whether we could say there's any surprises. But what surprised you about the race as you've been following and covering? And I know you do that very intensely.
Yeah, I mean, I've been writing about it for months now, so it's wild when it comes down to this. I think my biggest surprise is the smallest surprise, which is that Marty Walsh had thousands of people on the street, literally. I was expecting it, but the extent to which it really was. I was explaining out before we came on that, I went to about 10 precincts between Dorchester and South Boston early in the day, and there were at least 4 Walsh supporters at every precinct. But in addition to that, every intersection, every major street corner, it was a mob scene, and there were signs everywhere and people greeting voters. So it was a get out the vote effort like I've never seen in Boston.
Well, and of course, sometimes people like to, I know maybe denigrate isn't the right word, but suggest that while labor support is always helpful, especially in terms of raising money, the numbers that it actually translates to, how many live in the city of Boston is a whole nother thing. Eddie, there were, I think the estimates were that there were as many as 2,000 volunteers out there for Marty Walsh today. How should people see labor's support for him? And it's not across the board. Of course, many unions, some other unions endorsed other candidates, but he certainly seemed to benefit from union support.
Well, I think that, Marty in his tenure in the legislature has had to take tough votes, and in many, many cases he stood up for working families. And I think labor, a lot of members of labor respect that, but there's also been some votes, and charter schools comes to mind, where Marty has not taken a vote for labor and drawn the ire of the teachers' unions in particular. And there's been other instances where in my time lobbying as the executive vice president of the Mass AFL-CIO for public employees, where Marty has said explicitly, you're wrong, we need to make changes, and he stands strong in his convictions, even at his own expense sometimes.
So that, well, at least some of the criticism that was leveled towards him, that he couldn't, and if he were elected mayor, would not be able to stand up to the public sector unions, don't buy it?
I don't buy it, because I've dealt with them on many issues where when it comes to a principal vote, like something he believes in, like collective bargaining, then he stands strong on his principles. But there's also times when he knows, like municipal health insurance comes to mind, where the unions were standing strong, that they felt that any change was a direct infraction to benefits that we had negotiated. And he said, no, you're wrong. The municipalities need relief, and we need to make those changes. And that was really, it was his, influence over labor that really meant to make that law, what it is today.
Well, and of course, Chris, jump in here, because labor unions traditionally have held great influence, especially on democratic politics, progressive politics. This is a nonpartisan race, obviously, but
it is, and it's a municipal election, and I think when you think about even how many union workers I know who read the Herald, who read union bashing publications, watch Fox News, that's more of a national thing, And we saw a lot of labor support Scott Brown individually, for example, but this is a city election, and Marty Walsh is their guy, and I think it's time that. Marty Walsh has been proud to be union. It's not like he's been kind of skirting the issue here. But this is the time that if it is him and John Connolly, he has to turn John Connolly into the anti-union candidate. And I think that just this preliminary alone is going to show that union is not a dirty word, at least not in Boston, at least not in this city at this juncture. And most importantly, it's going to come down to, all right, so a lot of people have a problem with union money coming from outside of Massachusetts. Well, how about bank money? How about money from some of these these lending institutions, which have foreclosed on half of Boston? So,
what should be good for the goose should be good for the gander as well. Perhaps not as much.
I think that if
that been
someone's going to, absolutely, it's been overlooked. I mean, I've been combing through the campaign finance records for a while. There's a lot of, not always Bank of America say giving as a whole, but certainly, upper level management giving. And it's totally been untouched in this campaign, but you bet you will see it in the final stretch.
Well,
Joe, I think I'd add too that it is, labor is about chasing the American dream, providing the middle class an avenue to the middle class. And like Chris said, I don't think Marty shies away from that. I think he wears that as a badge of honor. But there's other aspects to Marty that a lot of people don't give him credit for. And I'll give you a quick story. A friend of mine, West Roxbury, 6 months ago, when the candidates were just emerging, saw a friend of his, neighbor, in a coffee shop and said, "Who do you like in these mayoral candidates?" And this individual, this fella, said, "You know, I don't get involved in politics. I've never given them any money. I've never put a bumper sticker on my car, but I'm going to work for that kid, Marty Walsh." And he said, "Why? What about Marty that is making you make this change?" And he said, "Well, I had an issue in my family. My daughter had a problem with substance abuse, and she was sick in my house, in my living room. It was 2:30 in the morning. I started calling people. I didn't know what to do. And sometime later, I talked to this fellow who showed up at my house, took her to treatment, picked her up in treatment, took her to meetings, and got her life straightened out, got her sober. And it turned out that person was Marty Walsh, who didn't do it for fanfare, didn't do it to try to get a vote 5 years down the road. It's who he is. And I think that the more people in Boston get to know who Marty Walsh is, I think that they're going to like him.
Well, they may get a chance to see more of him, at least the early numbers showing that he's amongst the top two, the leader at this point. But go ahead, Chris.
I just want to chime in on that note is that, we're going to hear over and over, especially anecdotally, I don't think we'll ever really know exactly how many union members, how many people are on the street, although I've heard estimates of 3,000 range. But what will go a little more unspoken is how many people from recovery, how many people from AA and other programs are out there. I've heard this over and over for months.
That might be part of the army of volunteers as well.
I believe that it is.
I want to go now very quickly. Again, joining me in the studio, Ed Kelly. He is the president of the Professional Firefighters of Massachusetts, former Boston Firefighters Union head, and journalist Chris Ferrone. We do have some new numbers now, and this is now with approximately 59% of the vote counting, and it's coming very quickly now, and this is the latest of what we have, and it's showing no change in the top four. Certainly Marty Walsh, an early leader, appears to be continuing to hold that lead, though John Connolly in second seems to be creeping up on him a bit. He's at 18.5%. Charlotte Golar-Ritchie, whom some people thought could end up in the top two and may still, she's back at 12%. Dan Connolly, the Suffolk DA, is at 11.3% again, and we will bring you the results for the other candidates very shortly. Guys, I want to go back to this because, and Eddie, not to shine the light on you, but certainly talking about journalists, and the Boston Globe has pointed the finger at the Boston firefighters, their contract, and saying that the area that's perhaps ripe for change is the Boston firefighters contract. I know it took you a long time to negotiate that contract, so I don't ask this question lightly, but and in that context, they said Marty Walsh may not be able to, isn't the person that could negotiate a new contract with the Boston firefighters. What do you say to that?
Well, I would say that, Mayor Menino deserves great credit for the stability in this city. It's actually probably economically booming right now. There's tower cranes in all neighborhoods in the city. People are working. People want to live here. There's the housing market is really, property values through the roof. And one of the things that has been very challenging in this city under the Menino administration is negotiating with the labor unions, with the people that make this city work. And time again, we've found ourselves going to a third-party arbitrator, basically taking a case to court. And in the time that I negotiated, which was not a negotiation, ended up basically a court case before
arbitration,
an independent neutral.
Right.
We gladly would have settled for a lot less than we ended up with. But because we were forced to get into that back and forth, it took us down a road that really we didn't want to go. And I think that the most important thing that you need at the table, whether it's a bargaining table with unions or trying to solve any problem that you're facing, whether it's schools, violence, all the challenges that our city faces, you need someone that can bring parties together, someone that can bridge divides. And I feel strongly that I've worked with Marty, and I've been told no by Marty and chastised by Marty, but also taught by Marty. And I think that that's really where his leadership and stewardship in this city that is